Now, a new performance of Julius Caesar by a New York theatre group is sparking massive controversy. That's after a blonde Julius Caesar with a red tie and a svelte wife with a Slovenian accent was brutally killed on stage. Let's discuss now with our guests, that's journalist and writer Mike Cernovich and Daniel Shaw from the City University of New York. Daniel, if I can go to you first, perhaps. Some say the theatre's crossed the line here. What's your impression of this performance?
Well, it may have crossed some literary lines, but I don't think it crossed any others. Artists and literary critics should have the right to write their plays and sing their songs and bring social critique into that. So I see nothing wrong with this enactment of Julius Caesar. You know, that's part of the entire denouement or the plot that plays out. It's more about the succession of power, who's going to take power. They did something similar 4 years ago when Barack Obama was in office, so I don't think it's crossed any line.
Some sponsors, though, they've already announced they're going to withdraw funding from the production. I mean, why do you think that is, if it's not crossing any lines? I mean, is it possible they didn't know the concept of the play from the beginning?
Well, it's interesting. Some of these same sponsors just pulled out of the Puerto Rican Day Parade. So these are corporate sponsors that are thinking about their bottom line. They're not thinking about any type of art form or people's freedom of speech. So I wouldn't look to the corporate sponsors for to be any types of guides or to have the final say on what passes as art and what doesn't.
Okay, Mike, if I can go to you, presumably that's not how you would view this whole controversy.
A friend of mine, Lucian Wintrich, is an artist in New York, and he wanted to do a pro-Trump art exhibit, and he was banned from the entire New York art establishment, couldn't even book a venue. So it's ironic that people are talking about art and how art should push boundaries and test limits. But yet, if you have pro-Trump artwork, the New York art establishment, of course, blacklist you, not even show you at the galleries and censor you in every way. Now, is this play protected free speech? 100%. I think it's vile. I think it sends a bad message. But nobody's claiming that the artists don't have the right to have the free speech right to do that. The issue is that it's creating a climate of hate. The Obama rodeo clown got people fired. The left is always trying to censor people on the right and silence us whenever they can. But then the minute they do something provocative, which is way worse than anything that I or any of my colleagues have ever done, then they want to talk about free speech and art and everything. So the art protected speech, 100%. If the government tried to actually arrest those artists, I would want to defend them, and I would support that. But corporate sponsors don't want to be part of that, and the American people don't want to be funding that.
Well, on American people, Mike, I mean, Trump's ratings are falling. Isn't one way of looking at this is a reflection of public sentiment, or much of the public sentiment towards Trump to start with?
Well, the polls were inaccurate leading up to the election, so the public sentiment we don't really trust. That said, criticizing Trump, 100%. I fully support criticizing Trump. I fully support people going after him hard, but then they cry when he hits back, which I also find ironic. They say that he's bullying them. But the Kathy Griffin with the head effigy with the bloody head, mock assassinations of Trump, all we have to do is, if there were an art performance where Hillary Clinton or somebody like Hillary Clinton was being raped in the park, if the Central Park 5 rape were being reenacted with Hillary Clinton being depicted in there, oh my God, there would be a complete and total pandemonium. There'd be riots in the street. There's definitely a clear double standard at work.
Daniel, just going back to you, do you agree there is an element of double standards here? I mean, Trump bashing is all well and good, but how far is too far? And Mike, feel free to jump in, obviously, when Dan makes a point as well.
Well, the Central Park 5 case was not the Central Park 5, of course. They were framed and they were later on acquitted, and it was a case of racial profiling, which happens across this country every day. It's always interesting to hear Mike and the Good Old Boys Club and the Trumps and the 1% complain about censorship when the entire media apparatus in this country is in their hands. And who censors actually the critical voices, the anti-imperialist voices. So he's really turning reality on its head, which comes as no surprise.
But I mean, the question is...
I'm an anti-imperialist, so I'm also...
Yeah, go on, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'm anti-imperialist. Yeah. Well, I mean, America, we don't have a free press. There is concentration of media ownership. So I would agree with this fine gentleman that the corporate media establishment in America is a disgrace. We don't have free speech in the media. CNN is a joke. So we definitely agree on that. And I think that we definitely agree that these artists do have a right to push boundaries. Where we would disagree, though, is the double standard being applied. Again, if there were any kind of violence being depicted against Hillary Clinton, very vulgar, crude violence, there would definitely be riots in the street. But maybe Daniel would be supporting those kind of plays, too, in which case he'd be a principled man.
Daniel, riots in the street, if Hillary was depicted, is that something you'd agree with?
Well, the hate speech in this country is directed, by and large, in the majority of cases, against Muslims, against immigrants, against Mexicans, against women, sexual harassment, sexual violence against women, against the LGBT community. So for Mike to talk about somehow that he and his people are somehow victimized as well is, again, to take concrete reality and turn it on its head. I'm certainly no defender of CNN and Hillary Clinton. He's not going to pigeonhole me into that. Well, I wouldn't agree that it's hate speech. Hate speech. I'd say it's an art form, but who's victimized every day by hate speech in this country?
Well, we've got a bit of a time delay, gents, so just give it a second before you both talk. But I mean, the artistic director of the theatre, he's already said that this performance in no way advocates violence towards anyone, Mike. So, I mean, surely this isn't crossing the line, at least in their point of view.
Well, of course, that's how they're going to spin it. They're going to say, well, we don't have any responsibility for what other people do. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Just like when the fake news media spreads lies about Trump supporters. And in terms of hate speech, there's actually a terrorist organization in the United States called Antifa. They are left-wing terrorists. Eric Clanton, who is a professor at San Francisco State University, I believe, he hit somebody with a bike lock and he is facing felony charges. So the hate speech and the violence is actually being perpetrated against Trump supporters. And most of what's being reported as hate crimes by the fake news media in America, actually, when they're investigating, 99% of those turn out to be hoaxes.
Daniel, where would you draw the line between, you know, freedom of speech and, you know, the problems that Mike lists? I mean, some people may very well find this offensive. They find other artworks, other productions offensive as well. Where would you draw the line with, you know, what many people describe as a very crude depiction of violence?
The crude depiction of violence that we see in this country is the reality of violence, the violence of the state, the violence of the police, the violence of the 1% unleashed against poor people, against the black community, against immigrants, centuries and centuries of scapegoating, of Jim Crow segregation. So when people like Mike come on here on the news trying to make a name for themselves and flip reality on its head and say that they're the victims, who can believe that for a second? It sounds awfully suspicious and fishy. I don't think they have any interest in the truth. I think they have a lot of interest in their own TV ratings and trying to sell their own, you know, self-help books.
Okay, Mike, but I mean, this is an issue you obviously feel strong about.
Daniel. It sounds like you're a fan. Well, I'm glad that Daniel's a fan of Guerrilla Mindset, my other work, and it's ironic that he would try to snark at me for coming on to RT, which I believe is more honest than CNN, when he's there too doing it. But let's just set that aside, and I would say I'm all about boundary pushing, and if the left didn't throw a fit about everything the right did, and it said anything goes, you can be a rodeo clown with Barack Obama, there'll be no boycotts. They tried to get Hannity. They tried to get Hannity banned from television merely because he was investigating the Seth Rich murder. So these advertiser boycotts, they happen at the right if you're just trying to do a little bit of journalism. But then when they depict the assassinations and murder of a sitting president of the United States, suddenly they're like, what about art? What about free speech? It's complete hypocrisy. And people watching are definitely going to realize that Daniel wants to apply a different standard. If it is so-called oppressed groups, then they can do anything that they want, and you have to leave them alone. And if it's so-called one-percenters, then anything goes, and we can all be attacked or whatever. So I'm glad that he admits that there's a double standard.
Daniel, is that an assessment you'd agree with, that there is an element of double standards here?
Well, I think it's easy for, you know, Mike to do what Mike does, another shameless plug for his book. We certainly saw that coming. Anyone can sit in a air-conditioned TV studio and rant on and on about, I'm gorilla this, I'm gorilla that. But the reality in our communities, I'm from 149th Street in the South Bronx, Mike, and you can join us there anytime to spout out your realities and see how you fare in the South Bronx or in West Oakland or in Detroit, across this country where people are suffering.
Sounds like a threat, right?
Where every day there's less jobs, there's less employment, less opportunities.
Mike, is that an offer
right,
you
so
may take
veiled
up?
threats. Yeah, I mean, veiled threats. That's what I love, Daniel. This is why I love free speech in America, is making veiled threats. Come to my neighborhood and talk from the Bronx. You know, I think that's great. I mean, I'll talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime. The fake news media actually works very hard to ban me because they're afraid of well-spoken, articulate, logical thinkers, and that is why people like me have been banned from television. But then nobody cares on the left cares about that when I'm banned from fake news like CNN, even though CNN will report on me and lie about me and slander me, but they'll never have me on one-on-one because they're cowards. We have no free press in America. It's fake news. So I would definitely meet with Daniel for coffee and talk about these issues all the time. I do a live stream with him, Periscope interview, because I think we would agree that the corporate media in America is a complete and total disgrace, and we would agree that free speech matters. I think where we disagree is that I don't believe we should have a double standard. If we're going to let the left say and do anything, at least legal, then you have to let the right say and do anything legal as well. What would be your answer to that, Daniel?
I'm not going to engage in a literary debate with you. There's very little we could agree on. You're attacking the corporate media, which is a reality from the right. I'm attacking it from a more critical, you know, leftist viewpoint. I feel like it's actually very mediocre of you to try to paint yourself as this censored voice. You're trying to play this psychological trick so that more networks will invite you on, that you're this cutting-edge thinker when you're a great mediocrity, frankly.
All right, gentlemen, we are running a bit out of time here, but I'd like to give you just 30 seconds for each of your final thoughts. Mike, just if we can keep it to the subject of the debate, gents, not so personal. Mike, what's your final thoughts on this controversy?
The play is free speech, protected speech. It's also appalling. Corporations don't want to sponsor it. If anybody on the right did anything like that, the left would be in the streets actually committing an act of violence. The hate speech and the violence is coming from the left, from Antifa. It's certainly not coming from people on my team. Thank you as always.
And Daniel, violence is coming from Antifa, not from this play. Final thoughts from you, please.
Trump represents the billionaire class, not even the 1%, the 0.001%. Any artistic critique and any concrete critique in the streets in the form of any resistance against Trump should be encouraged. It should be promoted. It's the people, not the Democratic Party, that have to resist Trump on the basis of his racism, his scapegoating, his Islamophobia. The Answer Coalition and countless other groups are going to be in the streets fighting Trump and fighting this entire system.
All right, journalist and writer Mike Cernovich and Daniel Shaw from the City University of New York. Both gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us today and having this debate.